Tashidele, everybody. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, those who are living across the countries and those who are watching live from Tibet House YouTube. So before I start the 16th session of Introduction to Buddhism, I would like to request those who are joining from the YouTube as well and from WebEx that if you have any questions, the question answer session will start at the end of the session. So if you have any queries, so if you are not comfortable while showing your videos or asking, you can write down in the chat box so we can also read on your behalf. And today the session is on the perfections of the practice of these 6 perfections by Venerable Gen Tinzilek Sola. And thank you, Gen Sola, for accepting our invitation. And the main purpose of this series, Introduction to Buddhism, is that to people who wants to deepen their understanding on the diverse Buddhist disciplines in order to lay a basic foundation in Nalanda Buddhist Studies. So we requested many speakers, including Venerable Genlek Sola. So today, Genlek Sola will be speaking on the practice of the 6 perfections. So before taking much time, I'll give it to Genlek Sola. Genlek Sola, kindly proceed, please.
Okay, Romala, thank you, and welcome to everyone here. So let's start with just checking our state of mind and generating a positive motivation. So adjust your motivation. I think while you're engaging in this session, you'll learn about the 6 perfections. If you can, think of all the suffering of all the kind mother sentient beings, or the source of all our happiness from life to life, up to full enlightenment, and generate an authentic wish to benefit all of them. And think how the longer that we don't become enlightened, and do what we can to free those who have a special karmic connection with us, then the longer they'll suffer samsara. So in order to repay the kindness of sentient beings, and also to fulfill our own potential, to perfect or to increase and perfect our positive potential for positive qualities, and to abandon all of the sources of our own suffering and mental obscuration, then oneself must quickly become fully enlightened. So if you can, try to think, and for that purpose, then I'll engage in the session today. So sorry for my cough. I have a bit of a residual cold. Yeah, maybe we'll just leave it at that with the preliminary prayers for the session. At that, just a positive motivation. Because we have quite a lot to go through in just an hour and a half. The 6 perfections. There's even, I put together just a very simple outline presentation based on the Middle Link Lamrim by Tsongkhapa. But even so, presenting the 6 perfections in just a short way, there's a lot of details, right? There's a lot to cover in our short time, and we want to be sure to leave opportunity for questions or comments at the end. So if we cover everything and we have no questions and comments at the end, maybe we can do extensive dedication prayers instead of extensive preliminary prayers at the beginning. Okay, so I'll jump to my PowerPoint now. So 6 perfections. Yeah. Actually, there's 10 perfections. But we don't usually talk about the other 4. In addition to, so the 6 perfections are the perfection of generosity, perfection of ethical conduct or morality, pure morality, the perfection of patience, the first 3, and then the perfection of joyous enthusiasm or perseverance, and then the perfection of meditative concentration, the perfection of wisdom are the typical 6. In addition, let's see if I can remember. There are an additional 4. Um, perfection of prayer, perfection of power, perfection of exalted wisdom, and there's one other one I don't remember. Oh, yeah, there's one other one I forget right now. Anyway, because there's the 10 bodhisattva grounds for bodhisattvas who are Arya beings. Traversing the 10 bodhisattva grounds, there's a perfection that they emphasize practice of on each of the 10 bodhisattva grounds. Maybe I'll think of it later. Anyway, so the 6 perfections is primarily practice of bodhisattvas. So again, the perfection of generosity, morality, patience, joyous effort, concentration or meditative concentration, and wisdom are the 6. So that's what we'll look at today. First, I'll just present some general things about the 6 perfections, and then we'll look at each one individually. So in the perfections in general, what is a perfection? So an actual perfection of the 6 perfections, right? So the actual perfections, they exist only in the mind of a Buddha. According to Jetsun Chökyi Gyaltsen's Hiksha, right, the textbook of Sergei Monastery. So the main, the place he gives an argument for that, although I don't have the scriptural source, that's his supporting scriptural source for it, is in the grounds, just the grounds and paths by Jetsun Chökyi Gyaltsen. So I'll just briefly read. This is the quotation from the grounds and paths. So he says, if someone says the definition of the first ground means the first ground of a bodhisattva is an exalted wisdom of the first ground that is governed by the higher perfection of generosity. So if someone else says that, an opponent says that, he says, Jetsun Chökyi Gyaltsen, our own author, says this is incorrect because such an exalted wisdom of first ground does not exist, right? So why doesn't that kind of exalted wisdom of the first ground that is governed by the higher perfection of generosity? Why he says that doesn't exist. And this follows, or that is the case, because a person of the first ground who has attained the perfection of generosity does not exist. So remember, a person of the first ground is a bodhisattva on the first ground. So a bodhisattva of the first ground who has attained the perfection of generosity does not exist. And then why is that? Because a perfection of generosity on the paths of learning. So there's Loblam and Miloblam. So the paths of learning are the paths of those who have not yet achieved the path of no more learning. Right. So on the Bodhisattva path of no more learning, the Bodhisattva on the Bodhisattva path, right, or the Mahayana path, the path of no more learning is equivalent to the state of enlightenment, a Buddha. So anyone on the path of learning is a sentient being, not a Buddha. So he's saying, in his essence, the perfection of generosity on the paths of learning, or you could think in the mind of a sentient being, does not exist, right? So the actual perfections, the 6 perfections or the 10 perfections, they only exist in the mind of a Buddha, and that makes sense according to the etymology of the perfection. In Tibetan, paro duchimba, paro means it's like to the farthest shore. You think of an ocean having gone to the farthest shore, paro duchimba. Having gone is the past tense of to go, dro, deba chin. So you've completely gone to the farther shore of the great ocean. So here the great ocean is like the path of practice, of the path of spiritual practice. Having gone to the farthest shore of that is like having gone to the completion of the path of spiritual practice. So which is equivalent to the state of no more learning. There's nothing more to learn because you've gone as far as you can on the path of practice. So So the very etymology of the word perfection, perfection, yeah, in the English translation, it doesn't really capture the Tibetan very well. Haro du Chimba, it doesn't capture the meaning of the Tibetan syllables very well. I'm not sure what perfection is in Sanskrit. I wonder how well what kind of translation the Tibetan is of the Sanskrit. I'm not sure. But but in short, the perfection. So only it's like you think about generosity as a positive quality. So it's the perfection of generosity means you've generated that attitude, the mind of generosity, the practice of generosity to such a high degree, right? You've increased your practice of it, made it better and better until you can't make it any better, right? It's perfect. So of course that's only a Buddha. So then the practice, but so there's a difference between the perfection of generosity and the practice of the perfection of generosity, right? So bodhisattvas engage in the practice of the perfection of generosity, which means, they practice generosity with the intent to perfect it, right? Or any of the other six perfections. They practice them with the intention to perfect them. So yeah, so the perfection, any of the six perfections exist only in the mind of the Buddha, but the practice of the six perfections exists. So who trains in the perfections? The bodhisattvas, right? So, because the question comes, well, don't those practicing the path of hearers or the path of foe destroyers, don't they practice generosity? Actually, you see in like Theravada countries like Thailand or Sri Lanka that offering dana to the Sangha, dana is giving, is very popular practice. That's very much emphasized practice, just as it is in the Tibetan tradition. So definitely, people on other paths, in the Theravada school or the vehicle of those seeking liberation from samsara for themselves alone, right? The vehicle of individual liberation. They definitely practice generosity. They practice pure morality. They practice patience. They practice all of a joyous effort, concentration, and wisdom. But why don't we call those a practice of the perfection of generosity or practice of the perfection of pure morality? Um, the main reason is because they're not accompanied by the attitude of bodhicitta, right? So to be a practice of the perfection of generosity, it has to be a practice of generosity in a way that the one practicing generosity is striving not just to practice generosity, but striving to achieve full enlightenment, striving to take the practice of generosity to its highest possible degree of development, which is, that in the mind of an enlightened being, fully enlightened Buddha. And the same with the other six. So if one's practice of generosity is not accompanied by um, at least the aspiration to achieve full enlightenment in order to benefit all sentient beings, then it's not a practice of the perfection of generosity. It's just a practice of generosity. So we can distinguish between three now that we've talked about: the perfection of generosity, or the six perfections, the practice of the six perfections, and then the practice of just, the six, you could say, the generosity, morality, patience, and so forth. So the practice of, generosity, morality, patience, and so forth exists in the mind of an ordinary being like ourselves who might not have a bodhicitta or even the aspiration to achieve enlightenment to any degree. And exists, of course, in the mind of someone striving to achieve individual liberation. They practice those six. And then the practice of the perfection of generosity and so forth exists in the mind of a bodhisattva because it's accompanied by uncontrived bodhicitta, and and then from the middle path of accumulation upwards, it's accompanied by wisdom realizing emptiness. So in order, so bodhisattvas. So back to the outline here. Bodhisattvas practice. Let me try to use the patient little thing. So bodhisattvas. There we go. Bodhisattvas, so they practice the six perfections in order to ripen their own mind, their own potential for enlightenment. So what does that mean? in the great scope of the Lamrim, then first is initially how to develop bodhicitta, right? And then after that is, okay, well, once you develop bodhicitta, what are the practices that you actually engage in? And there's two practices: to ripen one's own potential or ripen one's own mind, and then practices to ripen the minds of others. So for a bodhisattva, one who's generated bodhicitta, first they focus on developing their own potential, but then they focus on developing the potential of others, and they do so simultaneously. But the presentation in Lamrim first is um, practices in order to ripen one's own potential for enlightenment, and those are the six perfections, right? So and the six perfections again are conjoined with bodhicitta, and then wisdom realizing emptiness. Um, yeah, there's some doubt about, and I'm not sure how to answer because there are a few bodhisattvas of dull faculties who initially generate a bodhicitta before they've realized emptiness. Most people they realize emptiness and then generate bodhicitta. But for those of especially dull faculties who primarily do things based on faith, kind of blind faith, more or less, then they there are a few who generate bodhicitta without having realized emptiness. So, and they're only on the small path of accumulation, right? On the path of accumulation, there's a small, middling, and great. So only on the very initial path of accumulation, there are bodhisattvas who have not realized emptiness. So there's a question: do those bodhisattvas practice the six perfections? Um, yeah, not sure how to answer definitively, but from the middle of the path of accumulation on up, the bodhisattvas all realize emptiness, and so of course their practice of the six perfections is also accompanied by and supported by, enhanced by wisdom realizing emptiness, as well as of course their attitude of bodhicitta. Okay, so then the six perfections contain all the practices of the bodhisattvas. So think of all the different kinds of infinite practices of the bodhisattvas, whether absorbing in meditative concentration, meditating on the Four Noble Truths, meditating on compassion, excuse me, meditating on impermanence and death, renunciation, emanating, generating clairvoyance, emanating different forms to benefit beings, receiving teachings, um, giving away their bodies, serving other sentient beings in different ways. So all the different practices of bodhisattvas can be subsumed into the six perfections, or included in the six perfections. Um, and then, so the six perfections, they can be divided into two groups. Those that, let's say, they're divided into practices for the benefit of self and practices for the benefit of others. So above, I mentioned that the six perfections are the bodhisattvas practice to ripen their own potential. And I did mention the practices to ripen the minds of others or ripen others' potential are the four types of, well, it's called the four ways of gathering disciples. Um, yeah, which we won't go through now, but anyway, it's in the Lamrim. There's four ways of gathering disciples: by giving material things, then giving advice, um, then practicing in accordance with one's own advice, and there's one other one, I don't remember. Um, okay, so back to the six perfections. So the six perfections can be divided into two groups. Those practices, the practices of the six perfections that are primarily for the benefit of oneself, the bodhisattva themselves, and primarily for the benefit of others, right? So the first three are primarily to benefit um, others, right? So practice generosity is primarily to benefit the people we're giving to. The practice of ethical conduct is essentially not harming others. Practice of ethical conduct or morality is essentially not harming others. So it's primarily in order to benefit others. Of course, there's benefit to us as well, but it's primarily to benefit others. And then the practice of patience is not getting angry, um, primarily not getting angry at others and persevering in the face of hardship. Um, So those are primarily to benefit because those all directly relate to others. Whereas you can see those that are for self, meditative concentration, when if I sit and and if I sit in absorbed in meditation, focusing my mind single pointedly on one thing, at that time I'm not really interacting with anybody else, right? So it doesn't really directly affect others in that moment. Of course, in the long term, indirectly it's beneficial for others, but in that very moment, it doesn't, it's not directly doing something to benefit others. And the same with, when we contemplate and generate wisdom. So these both are primarily for the benefit of oneself, these two perfections. And then the last one is actually the fourth one, um, the enthusiastic effort or joyous enthusiasm, sundru. Sundru is both, right? Because sundru is actually combined with all the others. It's a way of supporting and enhancing, increasing all of the others. So it's both for the benefit of self and others. And then why are there six perfections in this order? So in the middle length Lam presentation, again, this is something that was very nicely described. I thought to share it with you. Let me see if I can remember it um, accurately. So basically the description is something like this, that so a bodhisattva, then initially, in order to further increase the realizations on the path, they need a great store of merit, right? They need to accumulate merit. And one of the easiest ways to accumulate merit is by making offerings to others, offering to the Buddha Dharma Sangha, offering to other sentient beings. So they engage in the practice of generosity. But then as they engage in the practice of generosity, giving things to others or making offerings to the Buddha Dharma Sangha, there's a danger that they engage in immoral conduct in order to acquire things to offer. So they need to make sure that even though they're engaging in making extensive offerings, that they don't get caught up in shady kind of business deals, acquiring a lot of wealth to make offerings. So they need to be mindful that their conduct is ethical and pure, right? That they don't do anything in the course of making offerings to harm other sentient beings, right? So then, but then, in the course of practicing pure morality, practicing generosity and pure morality, it might be that um, others don't like what they're doing, right? Others get angry that they're making a lot of offerings, or um, or that others, who maybe want to sell them something that's stolen or something, they don't buy it. That in the course of practicing plurality, the bodhisattvas, some well, on one hand, it could be that they upset others. On the other hand, it could be that they face hardships, right? Because in making offerings, it can be physically exhausting. It can be mentally exhausting. And in the course of keeping one's vows, sometimes we have to refrain from doing things that we like eating in the evening, or you know, I don't know, as a monk or non, like eating in the evening, or going out after dark, or refraining from intoxicants or something. So there can be like hardship involved, can also upset the minds of others. So in such and also it's also, maybe this is the most important one. Also, there's a danger that if we get angry in the course of practicing generosity and morality, if we get angry, we destroy all the roots of merit that we've created by practicing those. So for that purpose, then it's extremely important to practice patience, right? For those different reasons. So that's the third one, practicing patience. Um, but even if we practice patience, we don't get upset at others when others harm us. We don't give up when it's difficult to do things. And what was the third one? Um, yeah. Anyway, even if we practice patience, and we don't get angry and thereby don't destroy the roots of merit, still it can be the case that our enthusiasm wears thin, right? That we kind of grow despondent, or especially, I think it's mentioned in the text that as we accumulate merit and are very good at practicing patience, the mind becomes quite joyful. So as the mind becomes more joyful, there's more and more danger that we just think, well, why not just kind of stop here and just enjoy this kind of level of realization I've developed? Why, push to to um, to increase my level of realization higher and higher? So there's a danger of becoming despondent and lazy because things are going well. So in regard to that kind of circumstance, then we have to reassert our determination to generate higher and higher levels of realization as a bodhisattva. So we have to practice perseverance and joyous effort. And then, but if we do so with a distracted mind, then we can't make much progress. So we have to um, practice meditative concentration and refine and increase our ability to single-pointedly focus on one object of meditation. And then even if we can do that perfectly, if we don't generate, the unmistaken right view of emptiness, then we can't cut the afflictions from the root. So therefore, we have to generate wisdom. So there is this kind of logic to the order of the six perfections. But that said, it's important to know that the six perfections, in general, there's six perfections, but within each of the six perfections, there are six, right? So for example, with the perfection of generosity, or even the practice of the perfection of generosity, then there's the generosity of generosity, and there's the morality of generosity. There's the patience of generosity, the joyous effort of generosity, the meditative concentration of generosity, and the wisdom of generosity, right? So, and then the same with morality, the second of the six perfections. So there's the generosity of morality, the morality of morality, patience of morality, and so forth. So within each of the six perfections, they can be each of six perfections, I should say, can be subdivided into six, right? So actually, there's in that way of dividing, there'd be 36 perfections. So they're all, but the point here is that they're all combined with each other, right? It's not that you practice or a bodhisattva practices one of the six perfections in isolation from the other six. They're all combined. So maybe we'll come back to that to describe more like how that is. So okay, so next slide. So next, generosity. So within each of the six perfections, how are we for time? And we have a bit of time left. Within each of the six perfections, I'll present each under three headings. Their entity, or kind of essentially what that perfection is, like the definition, and then the divisions of it, right? The different types of that perfection, and then how to generate in one's own continuum. So sort of how to meditate on it, how to practice it, actually. So with regard to generosity, change the color here. So with regard to generosity, so again, these are like the definitions more or less. They're not strict definitions in the sense that they would cover every instance of the practice of the perfection of generosity, but they're more like general descriptions of what it is of each with each. So that's why it says entity as opposed to definition. So so the entity of generosity is it's a virtuous mind, of course, that's wishing to give. So usually in Tibetan, the definition of generosity is dongsam, right? Dongwei sampa, the intention or the wish to give something. So here it's added, it's a virtuous mind, wishing to give, because we could wish to give with a non-virtuous mind, right? Um, it's a virtuous mind wishing to give. And then the actions of the body and we got actions of body, and we could put speech as well. Actions of body, speech, and mind um, compelled by that, right? Or that are brought about by that. So yeah, so in essence, think, generosity. What does it mean? It means the intention to give. Um, so first of all, then, well, we might ask the question, well, to actually practice generosity, don't we actually have to give something? No. We just sit and think about giving something. Is that enough? Um, we don't actually have to give something. No, we can imagine because, well, another way to think about it is because one of the main functions of generosity is to counteract miserliness, selfish stinginess or miserliness, a mind that doesn't want to give. So when we generate the mind that intends to give, that imagines giving, that wishes that beings have things, even we can't actually give those things to them. So we can imagine, like imagine all the people in like Ukraine, that they're free from war, that there's peace, or that they have enough like electricity to stay warm through the winter. So just generating the mind, wishing that they would have that, and imagine, giving away, offering our bodies, offering our wealth, our possessions, our roots of virtue, in the form of, food for those who are hungry, medicine for those who are sick, friendship for those who are lonely, and so forth. Just generating that mind, wishing to give, imagining giving, that counteracts the mind of miserliness, which just thinks, I don't care about others. I don't want to give anything away to others. I don't care if they get what they need or not, right? And I'm not going to give anything I have. I'm not going to give it away, right? So just imagining giving is a practice of generosity. But then, of course, if we just imagine giving, but then, when we go out with a friend and we have a meal, and then, we think, oh, it's too expensive. I don't want to pay, and we don't give, maybe once or twice, it might be true, but if we never actually give, then that's also not right. No, we should, when we have the ability and the opportunity, we should actually give as well, of course. Okay, so then a virtuous mind wishing to give, and the actions of body, speech, and mind that are compelled by that. So it's an antidote to miserliness and attachment to our own things, right? So by giving away and imagining giving away the things we possess, it also reduces our attachment to what I want, my having things. And then the perfection of generosity. So what is the perfection of generosity? Is it that we give everybody everything they want and need? No, because if that was the case, then none of the Buddhas, Shakyamuni Buddha and any of the other Buddhas in the past, they wouldn't have perfected generosity, because everybody doesn't have everything they need, right? So the perfection of generosity is the perfection of the attitude wishing to give, and the perfection of the ability to give away what one possesses. It's not dependent upon actually giving everybody everything they need. Okay, so that's that. Then the divisions. There are, well, there are these three presented in the Lamrim, and then this one actually is from Tantra. It's mentioned in Tantric vows. So the main are giving Dharma, right? Means like um, like teaching others to Dharma, publishing Dharma texts, making courses like this online available, right? So all the staff at Tibet House, when they offer the Nalanda course, the other courses, they're practicing the generosity of giving Dharma, right? And then and the practice generosity of giving dharma is primarily considered primarily the method of giving for the ordained sangha, whereas giving material things is the primary method of giving for lay people, right? It doesn't mean they can't do the other one or the other, but it's the primarily one or the other. So then there's also the giving of fearlessness. How do we give fearlessness? By protecting beings from harm, right? By seeing when other creatures, animals, or human beings are in danger of being harmed, and protecting them from harm. So if we, see an ant fall in a pool of water or something, and or a toilet bowl or something, and we fish them out, save them from drowning, it's offering the practicing the generosity of giving freedom from fearlessness. And then the one mentioned in the tantric vows is also giving love. So giving affection, kindness to others is also quite an obvious type of generosity. And then, so how to generate these in one's continuum? So generally, there's one answer for all six, which is to reflect on the faults of not doing it and the benefits of doing it in relation to any of the six perfections. This comes. So in relation to the practice of generosity, how do we generate in one's continuum? First, reflect on the faults of not being generous, right? Think if you were never generous, like none of your friends would want to go have tea with you anymore, have a meal with you anymore, because you never pay the bill, or um, or nobody wants to live with you because in the same house, because they know that you only think about yourself. You never share your things with others. Um, for example, also not to mention, if we're miserly, then we create the karma to take rebirth as a hungry ghost. We create the karma to take rebirth in an environment where there's not where the earth, the soil is not rich, where rain doesn't fall, where there's scarcity all the time. Also, we increase our own mind of craving, and our own we can say uh, attitude of poverty, is feeling like I don't have enough. Even people very wealthy, if they have a mind of miserliness, then they have a sense of being poor, right? And that causes the mind to suffer. Whereas it's possible even we don't have very much money, very many things, um, not very affluent, but we have a deep sense of gratitude for what we have, and we feel like we have a lot, right? So that makes the mind happy. It's a mind of wealth, recognizing all that we do have and appreciating that, then we feel like wealthy. So, but in order to practice generosity, we begin by thinking of all the faults of miserliness, and thinking all the benefits of generosity. So again, there's not much time to go through them here because I have 6 perfections to go through. We're only on the first. But some of the benefits of generosity are, what is it? Um, Jimbe Lonjo, Timgide. Jimbe Lonjo, Timgide. In accordance, in dependence on practicing generosity, we acquire a lot of wealth, either in this life or future lives, where we have plenty of food, um, clothing, shelter, money, possessions by practicing generosity. That's one benefit, and we accumulate merit, of course, and also the mind is just happy. No? Okay, so that's one way. Think of the benefits of practicing generosity and the drawbacks of not. And then meditate on actually giving away one's possessions. So 3 things: one's possessions, one's roots of virtue, one's merit, and one's body. So this is summarized in this verse by Shantideva from chapter 3 of the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, and where he says, this verse is actually, yeah, in one of the very common daily commitments that people do. This verse is included in that. Um, so from this moment on, without any sense of loss, I send forth my body, likewise my wealth, my possessions, and my virtues, amassed throughout the 3 times, the past, present, and future, in order to help all beings, my mothers. Right. So in order to help all sentient beings, then one meditates on, one visualizes and imagines giving away. Usually we start with one's possessions. That's why I listed that one first, because that's easiest to give away. And then one's roots of virtue are slightly harder to imagine giving away. And then most difficult to give away is actually one's body, right? Can you imagine actually giving your hand to someone? I mean, even just offering a kidney, which is, we don't die from, it's not easy to do because you weaken your own body. Um, just letting a mosquito bite you and take some blood is not that easy, but it's a good place to start. So, so that's giving. Let's go to the next one then, morality. Okay, so again, entity, divisions, and then how to generate it once continuum. So the entity of morality, again, from the Middle Link Lamrim by Tsongkhapa, is the intention to abandon harming others. That's the main one, is the abandoning harming others. Usually in Tibetan, we say it's a domsem, right? The mind that refrains from dom, refrain from harming others. Uh, yeah. So the intention to abandon harming others, together with the basis for that, means together with even actions that, here the basis means, I believe, even actions that don't directly harm others, actions that may lead one to harm others. So like even in your mind thinking to harm others, or seeing yourself focusing on the faults of others, that could lead you into, saying something or doing something that actually harms another person. So refraining from those kind of basis. Um, yeah, or even spending a lot of time with other people who harm others, right? That's kind of a basis, become a basis for harming others yourself. So refraining from uh, harming others, together with the basis for that, by mentally turning away from harming, right? So in one's own mind, mentally turning away from harming. So when we see that even the mind of wishing to harm others arises, turning away from that, recognizing that it's wrong, it's faulty, as something that causes suffering to others, and in the long term causes suffering to ourselves, right? Um, but that, okay, so this entity of morality, this description of morality, because we'll see below, look at the divisions of morality. There's the morality of restraint from harming, but then there's also, which is mainly what we're talking about here in the entity, but there's also the morality of accumulating virtue, right? So how does this fit with the immorality of accumulating virtue? It doesn't really describe it at all. And then there's the morality of accomplishing the welfare of others, of other sentient beings. So does this describe those? No, right? Not really. So it says in the Middle Link Lamrim that this description, this kind of the entity of the practice of morality, primarily defines the morality of restraint, right? So it's primarily referring to the first one, morality of restraint. So I'll put a 1 there. Okay. Um, yeah. Okay, so then more the morality. Okay, so another description. This is Chandrakirti in his Entrance to the Middle Way, Omalajukpa. He describes, and this is a common description of morality, that morality is the basis for all other qualities. So other qualities like wisdom, meditative concentration. So think like in the 3 higher trainings, right? What's the first one? Higher training in pure morality or ethics. And then on the basis of not harming others, our own mind becomes very peaceful. We feel free of guilt, free of blame, free of retribution by others. So, and we feel quite happy with the kind of person that we are. So, on the basis of practicing morality, our own mind becomes peaceful. On the basis of that, we can generate good concentration, the ability to keep our attention fixed on one object without wavering. On the basis of that, higher training in meditative concentration, then we can generate more clear and profound wisdom, understanding things more deeply. So that's one way, but also all are positive qualities. So if we practice morality, we can also more easily practice patience. We can more easily practice generosity. We can more easily generate enthusiasm for Dharma. So morality is like the basis for all our other positive qualities. So which color is associated with the ground, the earth? Of the 4 main colors, yellow, blue, red, and white, which one's associated with the earth? Yellow, right? So that's one reason the Gelugpas are called yellow hats, because the founder of Gelugpas, Lama Tsongkhapa, he very much emphasized the practice of pure morality and especially keeping the pratimoksha vows. And within the pratimoksha vows, especially keeping the vows of a novice, monk, or nun, or a fully ordained monk, because there were no fully ordained nuns in Tibet. So, and because of that, then his order of followers, among which there are many, many fully ordained monks and also ordained nuns as well, then because they very much emphasize the practice of keeping the pratimoksha vows, or the practice of pure morality as a basis for the practice of the bodhisattva path and the practice of tantra, then that's one reason they're called the Gelug, the virtuous school. And that's one reason they wear yellow hats, because the color yellow is associated with the earth, which is a symbol of pure morality. Anyway, I'm digressing. So now the divisions of morality. Again, there's the morality of restraint, which is what we typically think of, not harming others. There's the morality of accumulating virtue. Um, so why is that accumulating virtue? Why is that called, a type of morality? I'm not sure, actually. It's probably because, it's this description of the perfections, they're drawn from the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras. And especially in the Middle Link Lamrim, at least, I imagine in the Great Link Lamrim, it's the same. One of the main sutras within the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras is called Parchin Dupa, the condensed Perfection of Wisdom Sutra, which seems to have, at least several verses quite elaborately explaining each of the different six perfections. And so there it lists this type of morality, the morality of accumulating virtue as one. But also there's uh, Arya Asanga's commentary on the Bodhisattva grounds, Jangsa, um, or the Janju Senbei Sa, the Bodhisattva's grounds, where, because there's one of the actually one of the 10 perfections associated um, with each of the 10 Bodhisattva grounds. Then he gives some description there. Anyway, I'm not sure why, but there is the morality of accumulating virtue. And then the morality of, sorry, the morality of accomplishing the welfare of sentient beings. So this can all be subsumed in what His Holiness, His Holiness Dalai Lama's advice, often is, or his kind of synopsis, summarization of his own practices, to not harm any other being and benefit them as much as possible. So yeah, I mean, if you think about it, it kind of makes sense that, the practice of doing what's right. I mean, in short, like ethical conduct or moral conduct means doing what's appropriate in the particular circumstances. That's how our Aristotle, the ancient Greek philosopher, he described, ethics as essentially doing what is appropriate in the appropriate circumstances, right? So it's very difficult to make a rule, how you should behave in any different circumstance whatsoever. Um, that's kind of his point. You can't really lay down laws about like what should be done in any circumstance. You have to look at the circumstances and in that circumstance decide what's right. But we can say in any case, like in all cases, we should always, you know, in terms of doing what's right, it's always right to not harm others, um, and to do what we can to benefit, right? To benefit others. So, yeah, okay. So divisions of morality like that. And then how to practice. So again, generate a strong and stable desire to protect one's pure morality. How do we do that? By meditating extensively on the faults of not protecting one's morality, right? So think of, as a Buddhists, the very basic kind of code of moral conduct that we should try to follow is abandoning the 10 non-virtuous actions, right? And practicing and then engaging in the opposites. So, start with killing, right? Then how do we generate a very strong mind wishing not to kill? By thinking of all the faults that come from killing creatures, and then the many benefits that come from practicing not killing. So, for example, like for myself, I grew up, in the United States and in a Christian family, and yeah, I mean, in the Ten Commandments in Christianity, the first one is do not, thou shalt not kill. But it's only talking about humans. To kill animals is fine. Kill humans you can't do, but animals is okay in the Christian kind of worldview. So I grew up, killing animals as a kid, but then and some circumstance, like one time I had a BB gun. I got a BB gun when I was like, I don't know, 14 or 15. And so I started, trying to shoot animals. So I remember one time I shot a bird, and um, once I shot, well, I'll try to keep it brief, but once I shot a bird, but then, you go up to see the bird that you shot. It's kind of like the prize to see the bird that you just shot, but it wasn't dead, right? It was still wailing around on the ground. And so then it really struck me like how much that creature suffers, by shooting it. Um, and then I felt obligated to kill it, to put it out of its misery. But then it's like things just get worse as you try to kill this creature, which you feel at that point you feel sorry for. That's a pretty miserable experience. Um, then another time I shot a bird. So, you learn lessons and then you forget for long. So then another time I shot a bird, and it died promptly. Then I went to see it and I didn't realize it had a mate, and the mate was was basically crying. The mate saw that its mate had been suddenly killed, and then was sitting very nearby on a tree, like much closer than a bird would ordinarily let you come. Because I went to look at the dead bird, and the mate was just sitting, hanging on a tree, like very close. But it was so overwrought with kind of a sadness, I think that, and the sound that it was making was very, it wasn't like ordinarily chirping bird. It was like a very sad sound. So I think after that, I never killed another animal intentionally. Um, so yeah, so you think about those kind of things, the suffering that comes about through not practicing pure morality to others, and then that kind of suffering eventually comes back to yourself through the force of karma. And so thinking about those things, how oneself suffers, how others suffer by harming, by causing harm, then it strengthens your resolve to not harm others. Okay, so now we'll go to the next. Patience. So the third one, practice of patience. Let's just jump straight to the entity. It's a mind. Okay, so practicing patience is for the mind to not be disturbed. All right, for the mind to not be disturbed by harm done to oneself by others, or by suffering that arises in one's own continuum, like when you get sick, or you feel lonely, or unhappy, or just whatever. So, so either when one's harmed by others, to not let one's mind get disturbed, not get angry, not generate the mind wishing to retaliate, and then when oneself suffers, to not become despondent, not become like to give up, not to become angry just at the circumstances, but rather to remain calm, right? To keep the mind at ease, relaxed, happy, peaceful, and to remain intent on Dharma. So this I haven't seen in other places in a definition, but it makes sense, no? That you remain, intent on practicing Dharma. So you can imagine, someone else is doing something that you think is not right. Someone else is doing something to annoy you, that bothers you. So one way is to get angry at them and then, tell them to shut up or whatever, and not retaliate. Do something that will harm them, but maybe hopefully make them stop doing what you don't like them doing, right? Um, but another, and then, but but in that moment, you tell someone, okay, just shut up. Are you practicing Dharma? Are you practicing compassion? Are you practicing kindness to sentient beings? Are you using the practice of Dharma degenerates in that moment, and also we become more agitated, disturbed. So practice of patience is even in the face of harm done by others, in the face of suffering that arises, and even in the course of practicing Dharma when we have hardship come about, um, to remain calm and to remain intent on practicing Dharma. And then divisions are again three. The the patience. So there's the patience of being indifferent to harm by others. So when others harm us, not getting upset, not getting angry, but rather just thinking like, okay, whatever. This is, and there's different ways to think. One way is to think this is a result of my own karma. I've harmed other people like this in the past. It's only because of that that this person now is harming me. Right? Another way to think is that this person is controlled by their afflictive emotions. They're controlled by their own selfishness, their inconsideration, their own anger. That's why they're harming me. It's not because they want. It's not because they think they're going to, make me happy or they're going to be happy. Or because they've just decided to do this very deliberately out of wisdom. It's rather because their mind's obscured by ignorance and other afflictive emotions that they're acting in this way. It's another way to think, and then generate compassion for them. Another way to think is, oh, as someone who's aspiring to the Bodhisattva path, I have to perfect the practice of patience. In order to do that, if other people just treat me nice and act in the way I want to, how can I ever practice patience? There's no opportunity to practice patience. In order to practice patience, I need other people to do things I don't like. Right? I need other people to treat me in ways that are disturbing to me. so that I can practice patience in that circumstance. I need suffering to arise in order to practice bearing that suffering with dignity and grace and remaining calm. Um, so when one can think, oh, this person practicing, this person harming me is actually probably an emanation of all the Buddhas and an emanation of my own guru, emanating in a way that's given me the opportunity to practice patience, right? So there's all different ways to think. Okay, so there's the patience of being indifferent to harm by others. There's the patience of accepting suffering um, that arises in one's own continuum. So when one gets sick, when one feels, sad, when one feels lonely, when one feels just kind of like one is incapable, all kind of suffering arise in our continuum. At those times, when one is confused, one doesn't know what to do, and is worried about the future, then one can practice the patience of accepting suffering arises in one continuum. And we'll come back to that one in just a minute. And then the patience of having certainty about Dharma, or it means like remaining intent on Dharma, like I translated it up here, remaining intent on Dharma. So means when we're practicing Dharma, like like maybe you've taken vows to not take intoxicants, but then you go to someone invites you to a wedding and everybody else is like drinking beer and wine and having a good time, and then you feel kind of down. You feel like, oh man, do I really have to keep this vow to not take intoxicants? It's so hard. Like, and everybody thinks I'm just strange, So at that moment, then it's a little difficult, right, to practice, to keep the vow you've pledged yourself to. Or if you like take initiations and you're supposed to say like one mala of mani mantras every day, but then one day you're like traveling and you're super busy, you forgot about it. By the end of the day in the evening, you're exhausted, you want to go to bed, and you suddenly remember, oh, I'm supposed to say a whole mala of mani mantras and I haven't yet. Like, do I really have to? So in those times, like kind of remaining steadfast, persevering, doing something that you know is right, um, even though it's hard, right? So that's kind of the patience of practicing, the patience, practicing patience of having certainty or having intent on practicing Dharma. So these kind of patience, practicing patience, is described like wearing a suit of armor. Um, wearing a kind of protective shield so that things don't harm you. Other people, acting in kind of negative ways don't harm you. Your own suffering arising in your own mind, it doesn't disturb you. And then even, enduring hardship and practicing Dharma, it doesn't disturb your mind. Your mind remains at peace. And then how to generate patience in one's continuum. Um, okay, so how to practice the patience of being indifferent to harm by others, first of all. So there's these nice verses from Chandakirti. We're running out of time, so I'm just going to read them quickly. I won't, we won't, don't have time to explain. But this is from Entrance to the Middle Way by Chandakirti. If one becomes angry, so this is some different ways to think when other people are harming you. If one becomes angry at a harm that was done, does being angry help reverse what was already done? Or they've already harmed you. Right? So becoming angry isn't going to stop them from harming you. That's already happened, right? So being angry at it has no meaning here and now. In the present, being angry doesn't stop them from harming you in the past. It is in conflict even with the world beyond. And then if you think about your own future lives, if you get angry, you're just going to create causes to suffer in future lives. So you're harming yourself in future. You're harming yourself by becoming angry because you're creating negative karma, which will cause you to suffer in the future. Also, like His Holiness often points out, if someone harms you and then you become angry, are you reducing the likelihood that they're going to harm you again in the future? Or are you increasing it? You're probably increasing it. Okay? If someone's done something to harm you and then you become angry at them, then you're just creating a cause for them to be more angry at you and retaliate in most cases. Right? So like that. And then Chandrakirti goes on. It creates an ugly appearance. So when you get angry, you look ugly. Your appearance looks, just very disturbed, unpleasant, and leads to what is not sublime. Right? It destroys your practice of the path. It robs one of reason to differentiate what is right and wrong. Think of if you really become angry you can't think clearly, like what's wise to do, what's right and wrong to do. You can see that in the case, when you've been with other friends and one friend gets really angry at the other. They just start talking like nonsense, make no sense what they're saying. Then intolerance swiftly casts one to lower realms. One creates, karma to take rebirth in the lower realms. And then, so then alternately, the benefits of practicing patience, forbearance or patience here, creates qualities that are contrary to those described above, right? So you look attractive. With forbearance, one is attractive. It sends one to the sublime, so all of one's positive qualities increase in knowing what is the norm and what is not so. So you know what is right and wrong, right? What is good and what's bad to do. It increases your kind of clarity and wisdom. One becomes learned, and in his afterpath, takes rebirth as a celestial, like as a god or goddess, or as a human. You take a good rebirth by practicing patience. And then, okay, so this one then, how to practice the patience of accepting suffering. So there's a few helpful advices here. So one is to think, and Shantideva says this very well, although I didn't quote him here. If you can stop, something that's causing you from suffering, there's no point being unhappy about it, right? There's no point your mind getting unhappy about it. Just stop whatever it is that's causing you. Like if you're sick and you're unhappy about it, there's no point being unhappy about it. That's not going to make you get better. Rather, just do what you need to do to get better, right? Focus on that instead. And then if you can't stop the cause of suffering, there's also no point becoming unhappy about it because that's not going to, you can't stop it. You can't do anything about it. So you're becoming unhappy about it, becoming impatient just makes you unhappy, right? Just makes it worse. So there's no point. Then thinking of the benefits of suffering. So this is one way. When you're suffering, um, one way to practice patience is to think of all the benefits from suffering, right? So this may sound a little strange, but it makes sense. When you suffer, you're more strongly compelled to achieve a state of freedom from suffering, to achieve liberation from samsara. Right? When you suffer, also your arrogant pride is dispelled. Right? It kind of knocks you down. So I think you've probably all had the experience of, maybe when things are going really well, you feel healthy. All the work you do is successful. You receive praise from others. Gradually, it's easy we become a little proud of ourselves, and then suddenly we just get like a really bad cold, or we get a fever, and we're sick in bed for a few days. All of a sudden, that arrogance, it comes way down. We realize like how we're not really so in control of our body, of our life. All of a sudden we can just, have incredible suffering and have, be totally unable to do something about it. So it really helps reduce our kind of arrogant pride. It's another good quality of suffering. Another is one becomes cautious not to commit negative actions. So if one suffers, one can recognize that that came about due to karma, right? If one can recognize that one's suffering is the result of one's own negative karma, then one's resolve to not commit and not commit negative karmic actions, not commit the 10 non-virtuous actions and so forth in the future, becomes stronger. So one's resolve to practice pure morality can become stronger. It's another benefit of suffering. And then finally, one generates compassion for others in samsara. Like think when you got a fever or became sick, or maybe when you got COVID, then it's like for the first time you really know what it means for other people to suffer in that way, and you really can have much more genuine, sincere compassion for others. So that's another benefit of suffering. Okay, so now we're really running out of time. I'll try to go through uh, the next three in just a few minutes. Enthusiastic effort. Okay, so it's a mind thoroughly inspired. So the main thing is inspired, enthusiasm, inspiration, um, kind of, joy. A mind thoroughly inspired to accumulate virtue and accomplish the welfare of sentient beings. as well as actions of the three doors, the body, speech, and mind, compelled by that kind of enthusiasm. So there's two kinds, two types: enthusiastic effort, gathering virtues. So enthusiasm for accumulating merit, gathering virtues, and enthusiastic effort, accomplishing the welfare of sentient beings. So enthusiasm for benefiting others, right? So those are the two main kinds. And then how to generate, again, reflect on the benefits of enthusiasm and the drawbacks of not having it. So the opposite to enthusiastic effort is laziness. So think of the drawbacks of laziness. Right? Um, so, and there's two different kinds of laziness. So we think about the deficits of laziness. Two different kinds of laziness are: one is laziness seeing that one can accomplish. So although seeing that one can accomplish a virtuous actions, but one just doesn't do it because you don't feel like it, right? So recognizing that one has the ability to do good things, but just not doing them. So why one might just procrastinate, think, oh, well, I just don't feel like doing it now. I'm busy with other stuff now. I'll do it later. And another is one thinks, well, I'd rather just like, do frivolous things now, engage in bad actions. So bad actions, it doesn't mean like, murdering people and robbing houses and stuff. It just means kind of meaningless things that are done out of just attachment to this life, right? It's not dharma. All right. So just like now the World Cup is going on, if I could, spend some time reading a Dharma book or doing some kind of Dharma work that I've agreed to do, or doing my evening prayers, meditations well. But instead, I just use up all my time in the evening watching World Cup soccer games. And then by the time, I'm really tired and just can't stay awake anymore. I just don't feel like doing anything that's particularly virtuous, for example. So that's a kind of laziness, procrastinating. And then another kind of laziness is where one thinks that one cannot do virtuous actions, which actually one can do, right? So this is a kind of low self-esteem. So where one tells oneself that, oh, I can't do it. I'm not good enough. I'm not able enough. Um, so that's a kind of laziness. So we have to think about the drawbacks of those types of laziness, and think about the benefits of making effort, and thereby, yeah, generate more and more joyous effort. And meditative concentration, there's not much to talk about here. The entity is essentially a mind abiding single-pointedly in a virtuous mode of observation. So it means, with a virtuous motivation or virtuous intention, the mind single-pointedly focused on an object. So remember here, we're talking about the practice of the perfection of meditative concentration, or samdhin departure. So remember, again, it has to be accompanied by bodhicitta, and typically wisdom realizing emptiness. So, but within that, it's just practicing single point of concentration. And then there's two divisions: worldly concentration and transworldly concentration. So worldly concentration means focusing on, well, it means basically any concentration before you've directly realized emptiness. So this is Jikten Be Samden and Jikten Le Depe Samden in Tibetan. Jikten Le Depe. Jikten is world. Jikten Le Depe is beyond the world, so transworld. So generally, Jikten Le Depa usually refers to when you've realized selflessness directly. So you become an Arya being. Then all of your practice of the six perfections is transworldly. So the same with meditative concentration. Whereas before you've directly realized selflessness, it's all everything you do actually is a cause for samsara. So it's called um, worldly concentration, worldly practice. And then how to generate it once on the continuum. So how to generate meditative concentration. Of course, there's so much advice and instruction for generating meditative concentration. But in this context, the main thing is think about the benefits of generating meditative concentration and the drawbacks of not doing so. Right? So there's the benefits and the drawbacks. I say the plus and the minus. Um, so maybe I won't say more about it now because we don't have much time left. And then finally, wisdom. So the perfection of wisdom, the practice of the perfection of wisdom. So what is it? In general, the thorough discrimination of imputed phenomena. So basically discriminating or analyzing what things are is basically what wisdom is, the most broad. But Tsongkhapa says here, in this context, it's more talking about the wisdom that is the mastery of the five sciences. So, so the wisdom, understanding, and mastering, having mastered, having perfect understanding of the five sciences. The five sciences are was the inner science, which is Buddhism, Dharikpa. It's like grammar or language, um, poetry, and then Sorikpa, medicine, Zorikpa, like crafts. Let's see, Nangrikpa, Dharikpa, Sorikpa, and then reasoning, logic, uh, Denzigurikpa. So yeah, here it's basically having, generating. I mean, especially when we think about I mean, the real perfection of wisdom is mainly talking about meditation on emptiness, of course. But it also includes all the wisdom, whatever wisdom about things that we can use to benefit others, benefit sentient beings. But mainly it's talking about, wisdom understanding emptiness. Then the divisions, there's the wisdom knowing conventional phenomena, kunzo demba, like impermanence, like how to make good food, how to practice generosity, knowing about, Buddha Dharma Sangha. Oh, and then wisdom knowing ultimate phenomena, knowing about emptiness is the main one, right? And then wisdom knowing how to accomplish the welfare of sentient beings, how to benefit sentient beings. So here we can think back to, remember I said within each of the six perfections, they can be divided into six. So like, okay, so like there's the generosity of generosity, the morality of generosity, the patience of generosity. So when we think about like the wisdom of generosity, well, um, yeah, so how do you combine like wisdom with generosity? When you're thinking to give something to someone, to think, well, use wisdom to discern, well, if I give that thing to them, how is that really going to be helpful to them or not? What's the best thing I can give to them? What are the best circumstances to give to them? When should I give and when I shouldn't I give? Um, so you can use wisdom to sort of discern, what's the best way of practicing generosity? What's the best way of practicing morality and so forth? So yeah, and then so that's why it says actually here down here, the first five perfections are made pure or they're made perfect in dependence on wisdom and dependence upon thinking about how best to practice them. Then they become pure or excellent. But more how to generate wisdom in one's continuum, reflect on the benefits of having wisdom and the faults of not having it, right? Um, and then of course, study, like to generate the wisdom of ultimate phenomena, study about dependent arising and emptiness, so forth. Okay, so that's all. So we have any questions or comments?
I have a
Anyone
question,
would like to
Venerable.
share? Sure.
Good evening, Venerable. Yeah.
Good evening.
I have question in the generosity
Turn on
slide,
your
you
video if you like.
okay. Uh, in the generosity slide, you mentioned generosity of giving up roots of virtue. Isn't it in direct conflict with morality? Like morality is keeping virtue, and this is like giving up one's root of virtue. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, very good question. No. So it's not giving up your roots of virtue. So that doesn't mean like stop being moral. How would that be generosity? Um, what it means is like, so we acquire merit, we acquire roots of virtue. Or you could think even just positive karma, right? You acquire the sort of positive karma, positive energy to be able such that you will experience welfare and well-being in the future due to that. So you can imagine, and that's a valuable possession. It's kind of like money in the bank. It's something we can use and benefit us, and benefit we can use for. I mean, it benefits us in the future. So that's we can imagine. Well, you can think there's a danger that we become kind of greedy with regard to our roots of virtue. That we think, that's going to benefit me, and I have more merit than others, and I'm better than others because I've done more good things. Um, so reverse that kind of stinginess, that kind of miserliness, and also as a way of offering, whatever that we value. Imagine offering to others. We imagine giving away our roots of virtue, and the roots of virtue taking the form and shape of whatever other beings need. That doesn't go against practicing morality at all, because it's not harming anyone, and rather it's trying to imagine benefiting others. So it goes right together with morality.
Thank you, Venerable.
Any other questions? Or do you have another question? Okay, Doma.
So I think we don't have any questions. If you're not comfortable, you can write it in your chat box as well. Sharinla, do you have a question?
Yes, yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Venerable, just now you were saying that the purpose of generosity is not to give all that we have. I think there's a slide that I saw
Yeah.
earlier.
I can. Sure. um. Yeah. Here. I'm sorry.
It's
Here.
not to give away all the things. The perfection of it is not to give all things to all beings. So therefore, in if it's not to give things all that we have, then what is the perfections of generosity then?
Mm. Yeah. Good question. Yeah, it's a little tricky.
Yeah.
Um.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's it's the perfection of the mind wishing to give, right? So yeah, I mean, there's two questions. The one here is that what kind of the easier one is saying, well, does the perfection of generosity mean that you give everybody everything they need, right? Every sentient being has all the money they need, all the food they need, all the clothing they need, all the medicine they need. So that's quite easy. No, because there have been Buddhas in the past, Shakyamuni Buddha, have accomplished the perfection of generosity, but they haven't given every sentient being everything they need, right? Because they can't. So one, the perfection of generosity doesn't mean giving every sentient being everything they need. But okay, and then the second question, well, does generosity mean, does the perfection of generosity mean giving away everything that I have? Is that what it means? That I can freely and without any remorse, without any hesitation, without any regret, that I can give away all of my possessions, give away all of my merits, and give away, my body completely to others. Um, that one's a little more difficult to answer now. But I think we can say no. That's also not what the perfection of generosity means. Because, well, one, um, you know, if really with like a mind of bodhicitta, we give away everything we have, other people will give us stuff. We'll acquire so many more things because of the merit of our generosity ripening. Also, another way to think about it is because, our roots of virtue. We talk about, is it possible really to give away everything that we have? Can we give our mind? I mean, the most precious thing we have is our mind, right? Not our body. Can we give away our minds to others? Not really. Not like, we can give our money away or our possessions away. But so what would be, the perfection of generosity with regard to giving away all that I have? I think what it would mean is that we really sincerely devote everything we have for the purpose of others. So even though we can't actually give our mind to another person, we can generate the intention that whatever I do with my mind, may it be beneficial to others. That everything I do with my body, my speech, and my mind, I'm doing so in order to accomplish not just my own uh, uh, aims alone, but in order to accomplish the welfare of all sentient beings. So if we perfect that attitude such that we think, doesn't mean we have to actually give away all our possessions, but we generate the attitude, all of whatever possessions I have them in order to accomplish the welfare of other sentient beings. We need a house, we need shelter, we need clothing. We shouldn't just give those things away and walk around on the street naked. Like we'd get sick, right? And other people would think we're crazy and they'd lock us up somewhere. And then how do we attend, Dharma teachings on Tibet House and so forth, or about other teachers. So we need things in our life. And actually, in one way, um, in the Lamrim, it's described how lay bodhisattvas, they actually engage in business to accumulate more wealth, because with the more wealth they have, the more that they can do to benefit others. I mean, think about big Dharma organizations, whether it's Dalai Lama's private office or Tibet House, or the big monasteries, Drepung Ganden, or like the 84,000 project by Dzongtse Khyentse Rinpoche, to really accomplish the welfare of beings in terms of Dharma on a big scale, you need wealth, you need possessions. So it's not that we should give away all those, but it's that we should dedicate them for the well-being of others, use them to benefit others.
Yep. Thank you.
Sure. I think I saw something in the chat.
Laksana, there's a question in the chat by Pinsok Jomala.
Is generosity giving money to a beggar who is physically fit is good? Yeah, because it motivates them to beg more and become lazy to work. Secondly, most child beggars are traffickers. So we're promoting more child trafficking by giving money to them? Question. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's a good question. I actually had that one in mind while I was talking about using wisdom and combined with the generosity. Yeah, I mean, another good example is if you see someone who's clearly drunk and they're, who's physically fit, clearly drunk, and they're begging money, obviously just so they can probably so they can just buy some more alcohol. Is that a good idea to give them money? Um, yeah, I don't know. It's a little difficult, no, those ones. But let's just stick with your question. Is generosity of giving money to a beggar who is physically fit is good? Yeah, it depends on the circumstances. But it's true. If they're physically fit, it looks like they're completely competent to work. I mean, we don't know, just because someone looks physically fit, they could be like schizophrenic. They could be so mentally incapacitated, mentally deranged that they really can't work, actually. It's very, it's very possible. Not that it's likely, but it's definitely possible. But if it doesn't look like that, like recently, last time I was in Bangalore, I was standing at a street corner downtown, like by MG Road, and there are these you can see there's these whole groups. Looks like families from, I don't know, like Maharashtra or Rajasthan or something, not from Karnataka. You can tell by the way they dress. They're like Rajasthani dress, at least at that time. And then these two young women, like probably, like 20, and I was standing at the corner waiting for the light to change so I can cross one of these big roads. And they're standing there too, and they're begging mostly from the cars, because I'm a Westerner and I'm standing there. And they also came to ask me for money. And of course I didn't give them anything, because I thought they can work if they want. It's that they're just choosing there I mean, I don't know how much is their choice, but their whole family is just choosing to do that as opposed to just do some work. So yeah, in that case, I thought, yeah, I would just be encourage them to kind of basically waste their life just begging for money. But is that always the right thing to do? What is my motivation at that time? We have to check. If the motivation is really primarily just selfish, just because I don't want to give away my money, then that's not really virtuous. If the motivation is really because, oh, by giving money to this person, I think it's going to harm them in the long term. It's going to, um, what did you say? It's going to reinforce and encourage a sort of behavior that's harmful to them. So if our concern really is for their welfare, and because of that we don't give, that's not being miserly, right? That's actually being ethical. So that's where it's important to combine the practice of wisdom and the practice of ethics, morality, with the practice of generosity. But those things are not. And then secondly, most child beggars are trafficked. Yeah, again, that's true. So I never give money to children that looks like, yeah, they're probably being employed by their parents just to beg. It's not a good idea, I think. Um, yeah, that's a good point. So I have to check.
Any other questions? Mm, I think,
Yeah. So we dedicate, Domino?
yeah.
Okay. Good. Then, yeah, thank you all for attending. I enjoyed the session. I enjoyed actually preparing this kind of presentation on the six perfections. Yeah. Anyway, if you want to know more about, read in the Lamrim Chenmo or other Lamrim text is a good resource. Also, Shanti Deva's the Bodhicharyavatara, Chantra Sembe Jopa La Jupa and Chujuk Chemo. That's arranged. The chapters are arranged roughly structured around the six perfections. Also, Chandrakirti's text entering the entrance to the middle way, or Umala Jupa. And then Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary on that, Gompa Rapsel, or the illumination of the intent. Those texts are also structured around six perfections. So if you want to know more about six perfections, you can look at those. Anyway, so let's think whatever merit, rejoice in whatever merit we've generated by discussing the Buddhist teachings, Bodhisattva path, and six perfections. I think this is the way all the Buddhas in the past, as well as the Dalai Lama, Shakyamuni Buddha, and others, have become fully enlightened by practicing the six perfections. So by the force of this merit, may all sentient beings everywhere be free from every form of suffering, especially those who are sick and ill, and those who have recently died or passed through the bardo. May they take a precious human rebirth or rebirth in the Pure Land. May those in all the hospitals who are sick or ill quickly recover from their illness. And all those, especially like suffered from natural disasters like the earthquake recently in Indonesia. People were trapped under the rubble, or recently died. People who've recently lost loved ones. May all their suffering be relieved. And those who are caught in war-torn places like Palestine, Syria, places in Africa, Ukraine, especially right now. May there quickly be peace in the places they live. And then those all who are suffering the effects of global warming, from droughts, wildfires, flooding, violent storms. May they all be relieved from the suffering, and may this great challenge to humanity of climate destruction quickly be, may we find a solution quickly in reverse. reverse it. And then all those who are suffering from religious oppression, political oppression, such as in Chinese occupied Tibet and in China itself and other countries, may they quickly have freedom of all the human rights, political freedom, religious freedom. And may especially make Tibet quickly be free or to govern and practice Dharma as they wish. Especially so many Tibetans who are separated from their families, unable to go back to Tibet, or from Tibet unable to come to in India and other countries, unable even to use contact loved ones by phone or internet. May that situation quickly improve. And then all of the enlightened aims of His Holiness the Dalai Lama and others, may they be accomplished exactly in accordance with His Holiness intentions and prayers. And then may the Buddha Dharma flourish throughout the world. And all of our gurus, our teachers' lives be long and stable. And in all of our lives, may we never be separated from our teachers, but always meet with them again and again. And may all of our actions only be pleasing to their holy minds. And may we all quickly, us and all sentient beings, quickly generate all the realizations on the path to full enlightenment. Okay. Thank you, everyone. And thank you to Bad House for hosting this talk.
Thank you, Kenixla, Tujana.
Also,
Also.
Thank you, Venerable.
Just let it go. Tujana Kenixla.
also,
Simjanangukila.